Game 2 of the 2025 NBA Finals was about to reach the fourth quarter when I saw a familiar sight, one that I had been anticipating for weeks. Mark Daigneault stepped on the court to demand a particular defensive maneuver. The Thunder doubled Tyrese Haliburton before the half-court line, even though Indiana was in the position to have the last shot, and forced him to give up the ball, thus enticing Aaron Nesmith in a step-back three-pointer. While this ploy affected little in regards to the outcome of Game 2, it actually symbolizes a revolutionary time management strategy that is slowly taking over basketball at different levels. Yet it only makes sense that OKC have been one of the teams on the forefront of this principle, as their annoyingly up-close, physical and versatile defensive style has had some put them in the conversation as one of the best defensive teams ever. So what were we exactly looking at when we saw Cason Wallace block the bejesus out of Aaron Nesmith's three-point attempt? It's a defensive strategy the OKC kept up for the whole regular season, ever since they doubled Jamal Murray off of Russell Westbrook on opening night, forced a three-pointer from a sub-optimal shooter and got the ball back for a possession of their own. The core principle is quite simple. Anytime OKC's opponents had the opportunity to play out the last possession of any of the first three quarters, Coach Daigneault raised his hand to send a hard double towards the ball handler. It helps you achieve several things. You take the ball out of the hands of the primary creator, you deploy hound dogs like Alex Caruso to stay on them and deny a pass back. Moreover, OKC made a point to double off a relatively weaker perimeter shooter or creator, which plenty of times led to bad decisions on the offense's part. Anthony Edwards gives up the ball and it's a trade-off you'll take. An Alexander Walker turnover gets turned into 2 free throws. This state of uncertainty can lead to a lot of overthinking. With players conditioned to play for the last shot, they can get caught up in a limbo between turning down an obvious look and driving with the ball with no certain purpose. Not to mention the fact that any quicker decisions can lead to OKC getting the ball back and creating another possession for them out of nothing. What could have been the last possession for the Lakers gets turned into 3 points by Kenrich Williams. Toronto does get the ball back to their leader Scottie Barnes on this possession, yet his turnover allows OKC to get out and run and use the math to their fullest advantage. They win this stretch 2-0, even though they wouldn't have had the chance to shoot under a more conservative approach. Teams were so unprepared and faced by OKC's aggressiveness that even 49 games into the season of the Thunder using this approach on nearly every end-of-quarter possession, they were actually out in front in the unofficial overall scoreboard of such scenarios. The Phoenix Suns also went down the same path as others as Bradley Beal misses a spot-up corner three, which only gets turned into 3 points by Isaiah Joe, a legit 6-point swing. It was at this point that OKC had turned their hard double strategy into a 25-23 lead across the season, inexplicably being in the lead in situations where the opponent getting a last shot only seconds before the buzzer would be the most logical outcome. With enough time to scout OKC, teams did become smarter about using their aggressiveness against them. Here you see Coach Phibbs actively gesturing on the sidelines as his New York Knicks were well prepared in early January for such a trap. It has to be said that it was one of the contests where Jalen Brunson was also hard doubled in other situations, as OKC sometimes pleases to do, yet the Knicks generated 3 spot-up corner threes through rather simple player movement. We've seen these hard doubles in consequential NBA Cup games. They've been regularly used by the likes of Portland, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Dallas and others, and the Thunder actually have got to taste a fair share of their own medicine, both in the regular season and the playoffs. Though they have always had some tricks up their sleeve as huge proponents of such time management, like sending the player from whom the defense doubles to the opposite corner, thus to mess with the defense's mind and rotations. Furthermore, they are so accustomed to playing like this that in essence there is no situation where they will succumb to holding the ball and running down the clock. Even 28 seconds is enough to push the ball down the opponent's throats and then turn back and rely on their own strategy, since they know that ultimately the math will work in their favor. And that is the little game within a game that now is being played out every end of the quarter, Analytics staffers have calculations about how to manage the clock with as much as 1 minute remaining, and Oklahoma thrives in these scenarios by essentially throwing out any caution about the clock and just going for the win in the possession battle. No more holding the ball for the last shot, no more of setting up the offense. Sometimes NBA quarters end in a real track meet. Remember that this started with OKC having the ball with 26 seconds remaining. SGA gets 2 pretty decent looks from 3 in this time span, and all of our grandfathers are yelling at the television set about what the game of basketball has turned into. So how did the Thunder end up doing, you might ask? The tables were somewhat turned in the latter part of the season, with more and more teams being ready to generate good looks by playing smart in these 4-on-3 situations. If you're being doubled so blatantly or so early, you might as well take a very good look instead of killing time just for the sake of it. We could also see some teams crashing the offensive glass with a limited amount of time, giving the attacking team more liberty to send players to the paint, something that has been happening on last possessions across the league either way. Yet OKC's opponents had a meager 12.7 offensive rebound percentage, and I would suspect this number to climb against the same strategy in the future. If we try to look at this in some overall analytics context, the great Ben Taylor of Thinking Basketball once wrote that with 24 seconds left in a quarter, teams score about 0.6 points on average. Only normally you wouldn't see the defending team gobble up points as an added bonus. The Thunder ended up losing 29-49 after 63 such possessions in the regular season, and thus they allowed 0.78 points per possession and lost by an average of a meager 0.32 points per possession. Is that enough? For one, data from how other teams succeeded in these situations would provide more certain grounds for any conclusions. Secondly, OKC largely abandoned this approach in the playoffs, which I would love to hear more insight about. The more creative basketball minds have long pondered whether it isn't worth it to just foul and regain possession at the end of the first 3 quarters. Ben Taylor concluded that such an action would lead to a minus 0.7 point outcome, whereas just standing your ground, with the possibility of getting the ball back either way, leads to a minus 0.4 outcome. So hypothetically, OKC has proven that they did gain an extra advantage thanks to their ingenious time management. Yet we have to acknowledge that perhaps their defense itself was stifling enough to make anything work due to their incredible personnel and cohesiveness. Anyone who wants to squeeze more out of such data is free to use the Excel log that I have set up of all of such OKC possessions. You'll see all such instances charted, with other relevant possessions also noted and highlighted in gray. Just click on the video description to find a link. Also, please feel free to comment, point out any additional benefits or disadvantages to this strategy, and maybe you will take this analysis even further. Thanks for watching, thanks for following my channel if you have been doing so for these numerous years, and you never know, more old school highlights and analysis like this might pop up whenever I have the time. See ya.